Hi, everybody. We're going to start talking about the basic understanding of mental illness and mental disorders and what exactly they are and what, when we're talking about it. One of the benefits recently, in the last 5, 10 years, so within your lifetime, is it's no longer a taboo subject. We talk openly about it, and so there's no longer something to be ashamed about. And so when people talk about anxiety or depression, people may not know exactly what that is, but they have a pretty good understanding, sort of like how those mental disorders work. The problem, though, is that there's been what's called concept creep. So people are using those words, depression and anxiety, sometimes, or obsessive compulsive disorder, as a description of regular feelings. So some people are sad, they say they're depressed, or some people are like, like things clean. They're like, oh, I'm so OCD. Unfortunately, because of that, there is confusion now about what exactly a mental disorder is or mental illness. So this is what the first little bit of this class is going to be. Is going to be us talking about what we're talking about. We're talking mental disorder. So to be a mental disorder, there's going to be three conditions that are met. It involves a clinically significant detriment. So an impairment of functioning must be clinically significant. So, for example, I'm afraid of heights. I hate heights. I had a job roofing once, or I was a carpenter assistant, and so roofing was part of that job. I still did it. I hated it. So it wouldn't be considered a phobia in a clinical sense because it wasn't a clinically significant detriment. Like I could still do my job. I could still go to work. I just didn't like it. I just didn't enjoy doing it at all. But it didn't stop me. If it stopped me from working or stopped me from like going outside, that would be a clinically significant detriment. It derives from an internal source. Must be biology, ways of thinking, perceiving, or learned habits could be caused or excited by external events but cannot be an expectable reaction to present circumstances. So, for example, if I was really sad because a loved one died, that's not depression. That is an external factor that I'm responding to. And it gets a little blurry, to be honest. Like if I was still very sad, like I couldn't get out of bed, and that continued on for 2 years, then that might shift to a mental disorder. But there's also like sort of like, am I anxious? Feel anxious because there's a global pandemic? That's not necessarily a mental disorder because that's an external source, and it makes sense to be some sort of, be uncomfortable with this current situation. However, if that's stopping you back to number one from, let's say, getting out of bed or leaving your home or talking to people or whatever, then we will be moving into that range. Third thing is that it's not subject to voluntary control. It cannot be a deliberate decision to act contrary to the norms of society, like a hunger strike. So if I decide to go on a hunger strike, that's not mental disorder. So the thing is, like, you know, I have a few friends, unfortunately, who, well, I mean, not that they're fortunately my friends, but they suffer from mental illness and like depression. And so some people will tell me, like, you just need to cheer up, uh, as if that was an option. So they would be like, oh, okay, I'll just cheer up then and everything will be fine. I wish somebody would have told me that sooner. Um, so it's not like they can choose to respond to this way or like, please stop being, you should stop being so anxious. Oh, okay, I'll stop being anxious. So they cannot turn it off or can voluntarily control these sort of like symptoms of these disorders. So how do we determine if someone is actually mentally ill? It's kind of a fuzzy line between, like, what's the borderline between sadness and depression? What's the borderline between being just really like stressed and anxious? What's the borderline between, being neat and precise and having obsessive compulsive disorder? And the exact border is a little bit fuzzy because sometimes the cultural expectations are in the way. But here are some things we look at. So if you were a psychologist, you would have a DSM-5. It's called the Diagnostic Statistics Manual of 5, and it's the one that psychologists use currently to diagnose and help them understand and suggest treatments for various illnesses. They use symptoms and any characteristic of a person's actions, thoughts, or feelings that could be a potential indicator of mental disorder. Um, so if somebody thought like someone was out to get them or was acting strangely, there would be a symptoms. And they look for a syndrome. It's a group of interrelated syndromes manifested by a given individual. So it's not like you have one symptom or two symptoms and therefore you are mentally ill. It's usually a cluster of 10 or 15 behaviors or actions or thoughts that kind of end you up in that category of mentally ill. And it also hits those three criteria. So that's how we determine mental. In this class, I've actually already opened a Google Doc that you will do all your research and stuff like that. You will fill in your own DSM-5. Having taught this is the one part of the course that hasn't changed much over the few years. Um, and to help students keep all this straight, and there will be a task where you're a doctor and you will have to diagnose and treat patients. I'll give you case studies. And to keep that all straight, it's sort of like a fill in the blank sort of thing about various mental disorders, and you can keep it as like a reference check for this task. So sometimes, maybe less so in your generation, sometimes in my generation, and most definitely in my parents' generation, the people who are mental disorders are not separate from those who are not. In the 50s and 60s, they were separated through like mental institutions and stuff like that. Now they are not. So they have friends, families, jobs, hobbies, just like us, and they contribute greatly to society in many ways. So there's probably multiple people in the class that either A, have spent a time or may have been involved with mental illness or have mental illness, or B, know somebody who has mental illness. Chances are. So when we have discussions and online discussions and stuff like that, please keep that in mind. Um, just be respectful. So here are some people um, that have had mental illness. Some authors. There's some actors that have had suffered from mental illness. Gary depression. Robin Williams depression was another one. Okay. So this is just a beginning of like an understanding. The next step is to fill in the sort of like sheet I gave you about sort of like here, like the 4 or 5 sort of like subcategories of mental illness, and and then from then on we'll start with anxiety disorder, specifically PTSD. Any questions as always, please email me. Thanks very much.